HARK, we are here. It is time for yet another episode of Regroup Phase. Another video. I should probably make two videos, but we're going to do one, regardless of how much stuff is here. There's a lot of previews. We've got 3 brand new leaders again. We have a ton of cards associated with at least 2 of those leaders. And then we also have the reveal of the entire contents of both Spotlight decks, the Han deck and the Boba Fett deck. There's a lot to go over. We're going to start with a leader and a ton of interesting stuff going on here. Let's jump to Lightspeed. Our first leader is a repeat leader, not one I expected to see. It gives me some hope and a little bit of dread about another leader potentially we could see in the set as a repeat. Before he was Cunning, now he's Vigilance. We have Grand Admiral Thrawn. How unfortunate. Vigilance Villainy Imperial Official Leader. When you use a when defeated ability, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, use that ability again. As an epic action on 6, you can flip him into a 4/7, so average at 6 cost stats. He is a common number 2 out of 262 in JTL. His unit side is when you use a when defeated ability, you may use that ability again. Use this ability only once each round. So effectively, once per round, you get to use one of your when defeated abilities twice. On your flip turn, you could potentially use that, not that same ability 3 times, but 2 different ones twice, which is very interesting. Thrawn here showing up in Vigilance means he has access to some of the best control pieces in both just flat blue and then also blue villainy, which is very interesting. Seeing Thrawn again, it makes me worried that we might actually see another Hera, and that could be a better Hera, which is probably what people really want to see, and I also kind of want to see it as well, but it means I have to chase down another showcase, and the new Hera might not work for Spectres as good as the old Hera did, not that the old Hera did anyway. But speaking of any of that, Grand Admiral Thrawn actually is genuinely incredible. He's another leader that may not ever need to flip, but being able to flip him into a 4/7, he could stick on board for a tiny bit, dealing that 4 damage, or just on a turn where you need to use your when defeated twice. Now, to clarify, it has been ruled, for whatever reason, that bounty is not the same as when defeated, even though the rules text specifically state same as when defeated. So it's not a when defeated trigger, but it's the same as a when defeated trigger. That makes perfect sense, right? Basically what it means is that you need to have the text when defeated in order for you to be able to double it with Thrawn's abilities. So Bosk doubles bounties, Thrawn doubles when defeated. This is a fantastic leader. I think it's going to see a lot of play. It's also going to be a very impactful limited leader because we have a lot of when defeated abilities coming up that synergize very well with Grand Admiral Thrawn's ability. What are those cards? Well, let's take a look. Our next 3 previews come by way of TCG Player. Link in the description below to the article where these were spoiled in. They have a lot of Thrawn synergy, some good Thrawn synergy, some not so good Thrawn synergy. But this first unit, right off the bat, Primo. We have here Director Krennic on the verge of greatness. He is a 2-cost Vigilance Villainy ground unit, 2 power, 2 health, Imperial and Official. He's shielded, so he comes into play with a shield token. The first unit you play each round that has a when defeated ability costs 1 less. This is an uncommon, number 32 out of 262 in JTL. This is actually quite a good card. It's a little bit lower on stats, but it does have shielded, so it means it can survive it basically as a Crafty Smuggler, which, you know, Crafty Smuggler is very useful. Krennic having the Imperial tag, also shielded, and then being able to bring out your when defeated units earlier is pretty cool. There was a cool combo that was described by Saga to me on their Discord. Krennic on round 1, SLT on round 2. While you're playing Kira, you can sacrifice the SLT to be able to bring out Kira on round 3 instead of round 4, and that's a pretty interesting way of being able to utilize that so long as the Krennic itself survives. It is not a direct tie-in to Thrawn. It just makes Thrawn's ability to use his leadership ability much cheaper because you can play those units earlier than you would otherwise, or multiples of those units to be able to get the opportunity to use it more than once, depending on your flip turn. Krennic is a great card. This is going to see a lot of play. Fantastic across the board. Next, we have a Villainy Space unit tied to that Krennic. We have here Shuttle ST-149 under Krennic's authority. This is a 4-cost Vigilance Space unit. This is a 3 power, 4 health Imperial Vehicle Transport, also is shielded, so it gets a shield token when played. When played and when defeated, you may take control of a token upgrade on a unit and attach it to a different eligible unit. This is an uncommon number 242 out of 262 in JTL. 4 cost 3/4 in space isn't great, but it is shielded, so it will stick around a little bit longer. The fact that it can take control of a shield or an experience or potential future-proofing token upgrades in the future and attach it to another unit that is eligible. So right now, all units are eligible for experience tokens or shields. It is interesting. One of the things you could do, you could actually sequence this in such a way where you play the shuttle, you use the when played shielded token, and then you when played the shielded token that the shuttle gets off to another unit that is eligible to it, because it does say on a unit, not an enemy unit or an opposing unit, whatever the terminology is there. So there is a minor amount of connection there. Thrawn can duplicate this on the when defeated, when it is specifically defeated, not when it is played, because it needs to be during the when defeated step. So you could utilize this, but I don't think this is going to see a lot of use because there are other better space units that you can play on for that do better things, and potentially even things with better when defeated abilities that will give you some fun stuff right off the bat. So it's interesting, could be fun in a Krennic theme deck, but I think overall you're not going to see this too much. Our last preview here from TCGPlayer is another space unit that is a lot better than the last one and is going to see a lot of play. We have here Landing Shuttle, a 3-cost Vigilance space unit, 2 power, 4 health, Imperial Vehicle Transport. When defeated, you may draw a card. This is a common, number 63 out of 262 in JTL. This is going to be your average Thrawn combo. Landing Shuttle, try to get some extra damage out, or if your opponent defeats it, you're able to draw 2 cards on the turn that specifically happens, so long as Thrawn himself is not exhausted or have already used his ability in a previous portion of the round. Being able to draw 2 cards for 3 is pretty good. Being able to have that on a body and do different associated things with space units as a result of that, also quite good. This is a common, so you're going to see a lot of it in limited. Thrawn is also a common, so you're also going to see a lot of him in limited. I think this is a very good card that's tied directly to Thrawn itself. May be used by other things, but honestly, you're going to see it basically just a lot in Thrawn. Although, because it does have 4 health and 2 power, Asajj Ventress likes this card a little bit as well, because giving it grit plus the additional health plus additional power means it could do a lot more right off the bat. But it's probably going to be a Thrawn card, and you know what? That's actually pretty good. Next up, we have 2 previews courtesy of Hannonz over on YouTube. Link in the description below to that video. Go check it out when you have the opportunity. Some interesting space stuff here. Also meshes with Thrawn in various different formations. Let's check out this first one. Onyx Squadron Brute. This is a 2-cost Vigilance Villainy space unit, 2 power, 3 health, Imperial Vehicle Fighter. When defeated, heal 2 damage from a base. This is a common, number 33 out of 262 in JTL. If you want to use Thrawn and go heavy space, you already have Inferno 4, which is going to be able to help you filter through the top cards of your deck if you really need to, or if you don't necessarily, you don't have to trigger the Thrawn ability afterwards. But then Onyx Squadron Brute is going to be able to give you that mid to late game heal your base, or even early game if your opponent's putting a lot of pressure, and you still have the extra space units. A 2-cost 2/3 is right up the alley of Vigilance, being able to have more of the big butt for things to survive while still being able to put pressure on your opponent's base. And healing 2 damage from your base means heals 4 damage from your base if you use the Thrawn ability is quite good. And again, because this is a common, it's easily accessible. You're going to see this in limited. You're going to see this in most of the Thrawn decks. Whatever you think is already good in blue, this is going to add on to that specifically for Thrawn, and you're going to see a lot of usefulness for these types of things. I think this is a great card. This is a later introduction of a TIE Fighter design to Star Wars. Not a huge fan of it, but I'm glad to see it here because it means we could see some other interesting things, which is always good. If you're looking to add some extra spice to your Thrawn deck by floating into red, Hannonz has a second preview here covering you with Droid Missile Platform. Interesting title for the dropship. 3-cost aggression space unit, 4 power, 2 health, Separatist droid, vehicle, and transport. When defeated, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. They assign 3 unpreventable damage among their base and units. This is a common, number 162 out of 262 in JTL. Extra flat red space support for Separatists. They actually do have a couple of other things that are like this that can be very helpful, and giving that indirect damage to the Separatist player means that there's a couple different ways they can mesh with that. But given that this is a when defeated effect, if this gets defeated, your opponent suffering 6, so long as Thrawn has not utilized that ability earlier in the round. It's a very interesting design. I like this unit a lot because it is a 4/2 in space, so your opponent has to try to do something about it, which they don't have to do much. A Daring Raid knocks knocks this off the board. But much like K2SO, when you defeat it, you still have something to worry about, whether that's the base damage or the discard from K2SO, or for this, it's indirect damage, which can wreak havoc on your opponent's side of the board. They're going to choose the best option for them whenever they choose to defeat this, but if this just stays in space as a 4 power poker at 3, that's a pretty good situation for you as well. Hot off the heels of Roll-On Gaming's favorite leader in the entire game, Grand Admiral Thrawn, we have the Grand Admiral's ship itself coming up here. It's another aspect shift, but this card is kind of incredible. We have here Chimera reinforcing the center. This is a 6-cost Vigilance Villainy space unit, 5 power, 6 health, Imperial Vehicle Capital Ship. When played, you may use a when defeated ability of another friendly unit. When defeated, create 2 TIE Fighter tokens. This is an uncommon number 39 out of 262 in JTL. So on 6, you can play this, use the when defeated of another thing, and because you've used the when defeated as of during the when defeated step, you can use Thrawn's ability to be able to double that. And then flip your Thrawn, and effectively, if this Chimera gets defeated, you can drop 4 TIE Fighter tokens onto the board, and that's pretty good. But even still, a 6-cost 5/6, use another when defeated, absolutely incredible. 6-cost 5/6, when it's defeated, create 2 ties, also is pretty decent because it allows you to continue that board state if your opponent defeats this 6 health space unit, which is hard. Anybody who's fought anything like a Bright Hope knows that that's a little bit tougher than it normally should be. Because it is a 6 cost, it's going to be a little bit easier because there's other different things. The one thing you do have to worry about is this thing getting sent back to your hand, and that sucks because you basically have to do all the stuff again, but you do get that when played again if your opponent does that. Add a pilot to this, an academy graduate, or whatever the situation may be, and you can end up with a really cool ship that does a lot of cool stuff. Thrawn basically says blow everything up, the Chimera zoops in, blows everything up, and if it gets blown up, here comes a bunch of TIE fighters to resupply the Imperial lines with, and you know what? That's pretty darn cool. Next up, over on FFG Socials, we got to vote on what the first rare base is. We have a slot of rare bases here that are probably going to be all over 30 health with a penalty, which is an interesting design space, except for the card we're going to review today, because Vigilance is first up. Blue. You like blue, right? You like blue? Well, if you didn't like blue before, you're certainly not going to like blue now, because we have Colossus. This is a 35 health Vigilance base. Draw 1 less card in your starting hand. This is a rare number 21 out of 262 in JTL. Drawing 1 less card in your starting hand is a pretty significant penalty because it means you have less options unless you're playing control. Playing control on a 35 health base means that your games are going to go forever, because they do when you play against control. I play as control every once in a while, and I never go to time. It's usually pretty easy to get the games finished because you know when things are wrapped up. You never have to take things to the last final possible second, but it is what it is. 35 health is an absolute monstrosity in this game. It basically means that you're probably going to be facing anywhere between 55 and 70 health going up against decks that are running things like Vigilance and the Client, or any other of the health restoring things that blue can run when it comes to things that they do. I think this is a terrible card design. I think this is something that absolutely should not exist, or if it does exist, it shouldn't be in this color and it shouldn't be in red. Put it in green or yellow, and then I'll shut up. But the fact that it's in the control color and it benefits the control players, if you see this across for yourself, honestly, I'm at a point where if I see this across for myself, I'm just going to pick my stuff up and go home. I don't need to waste an hour on gameplay that is just, cool, you did nothing, 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 because that's not fun. Is that fun? No, it's not fun. And I know that you know that that's not fun. Our second leader preview of the week was released on Wednesday. This was the same day as the Spotlight deck stream, so there aren't too many previews that are associated with this specific leader. There are 2-ish that we'll get into immediately after this and then go into the Spotlight stuff. But for our second leader preview, we have a Vigilance leader who is also Heroism. Our second Heroism leader, which is Rose Tico, saving what we love. She's resistance tagged. She has an action ability that exhausts herself, heal 2 damage from a vehicle unit that attacks this phase. On 5, she flips into a 4/6, which also on attack, you may heal 2 damage from a vehicle unit. So it is an interesting design. It's specifically kind of trait agnostic vehicle support. And I know vehicle is a trait, but it's not specifically resistance or rebel or whatever the case may be. It is just vehicles. She flips on 5 into a 4/6. 4/6 are quite good stats for a 5-cost leader. I know a lot of people haven't been using Finn, but Bosk is a 4/6 that has definitely had a lot of use with those that stat line, and I imagine Rose will end up being in the same situation. I think for a generic common Vigilance Heroism leader, blue Heroism, she's actually quite good in limited because you're going to see a lot of vehicles. I don't know if she's going to be the outstanding best, but being able to heal 2 damage off a vehicle that attacked that phase, or when she attacks, heal 2 damage off your vehicles, off a vehicle, it can keep your vehicles alive longer than they would have been otherwise. Remember, vehicles both go in ground and in space because they're not limited to just space. It provides her with an opportunity to be able to do some interesting stuff. There's a couple of synergy cards that are going to come out here in just a minute that will aid you in utilizing Rose, but I think Rose is basically just the design of, we needed somebody who dealt on the heroism side, who did stuff with vehicles. Let's throw Rose on there because she was part of an era where they used a lot of vehicles, and that's how you get this character. It is a little unfortunate we didn't get to see more previews tied to this character, and I know why, and I know you know why as well, but next up, we'll see at least 2 cards that do synergize with this character. Next up, we have 2 previews from Valle del Jedi. Apologize for butchering the name. I am stupid and only speak one language. Link in the description below to their video. Please go check it out. We have a space unit. We have a pilot, not necessarily a space pilot, ground pilot, but can be in either one. Let's check out the space unit. We have here Red Squadron X-Wing representing the Red Squadron attack on the Death Star in Star Wars A New Hope. 3 cost, Vigilance, Heroism Space Unit, 3 power, 4 health, Rebel Vehicle Fighter. When played, you may deal 2 damage to this unit. If you do, draw a card. This is a common, number 51 out of 262 in JTL. It deals 2 damage to itself. On a later round, if you attack and survive, you can have Rose heal 2 damage from it, or you can throw the Red Squadron X-Wing out. You could flip Rose, throw the Red Squadron X-Wing out, draw 2 cards, attack with Rose, and then heal the 2 damage immediately because it doesn't require you to attack with that, just with Rose. Interesting combination here. They're both commons. You're going to see them limited. It is vehicle support. It's a pretty decent card. A 3 cost 3/2 that draws you a card, or a 3 cost 3/4 that can just attack into things, and hopefully you can delete whatever you need to delete. It's not a bad card. It's not an amazing card, but I think it's actually going to see an interesting amount of play in potentially Rebel Blue decks that also want to be vehicle decks. So, and because we're in the vehicle set, that could be something we see here relatively soon. The second card in this preview is a pilot. It is Rose's sister. We have Paige Tico dropping the hammer. 2 cost, Vigilance, Heroism, ground unit, 3 power, 2 health. Done. Or, for that same cost, 2 Vigilance, Heroism, you can pilot this onto a vehicle without a pilot, friendly vehicle without a pilot. Attached unit gains on attack, give an experience token to this unit, then deal 1 damage to it. +2 power, +2 health, resistance, and pilot. Uncommon, number 46 out of 262 in JTL. Ideally, you stick this onto one of your ships that has a little bit more health associated with it, and then you could attack, get the extra power, deal the extra damage, and then exhaust Rose to be able to heal that damage off. And basically that's a cycle, a 3-card combination cycle that could be incredible for this deck. But even beyond that, being able to give yourself an experience token for 1 damage on attack to deal that extra damage your opponent might not be expecting, in addition to the 2 power this already provides and the 2 health, Paige I think is actually a pretty good pilot. Now it's going to demand immediate removal whenever it comes down, but again, if your opponent is using removal on this, they're not using it on your Chewie or your more expensive pilots that we're potentially going to see a little bit more of later on. I like this pilot a lot. I'm not particularly happy it's in Vigilance, but if Resistance ends up being Vigilance aggression blue-red, then, you know, it'll work and we might have some interesting stuff. I'm hoping we do get a Poe leader that does some cool stuff with space units specifically outside of just what Rose does with vehicles, but if Rose is the Resistance leader that utilizes vehicles, we're in a good spot. Might not be a competitive spot, but it is a good spot. Our next batch of previews are the remaining cards that are included in the Spotlight decks, both the Han deck and the Boba Fett deck, cards that we haven't seen before that are included in Jump to Lightspeed. At the end of all the previews, I will actually showcase to you the deck lists for each of these and showcase a little bit how these are better than the 2-player starter decks, and they are competent decks that should be interesting to see play. I might try to see if I can jump out and do a gameplay video of showcasing these Spotlight decks whenever I'm able to get access to them, if you haven't seen that already from somebody else that gets them early. Should be some interesting stuff going forward. We're going to go through these pretty quickly because they are all interesting designs, but the quality of the images themselves are not great. So I'll be able to tell you the rarity, but not the card numbers. And we're just going to lightning quick get through these. So they're not in any particular order. They're just basically alphabetical in the way that I recorded them on my list, starting with Boba Fett. Feared Bounty Hunter. This is a 5-cost cunning villainy ground unit. 5 power, 4 health, shielded. That's all he does as a ground unit. Not terrible. 5 cost, 5/4. Not great, but he is shielded, which means he can survive at least 1 damage. Piloting for 2 cunning and a villainy. When played as an upgrade, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. If attached unit is a transport, you may deal 2 damage instead. That does set up Boba Fett's ability to be able to do some interesting stuff. You could also use it as a finisher with no disintegrations. It also gives you +2 power, +3 health. Underworld, Bounty Hunter, and Pilot. This is a rare number 189 out of 262 in JTL. This is the premier thing you're going to want to stick onto your Fett's Fire Spray to make it as powerful as possible, or as a backup to your leader, or potentially stick it on one of your other things and do some interesting stuff associated with it. You want to target that Falcon, which is why it's giving you 2 damage on a transport, but any transport in the game can be hit with 2 damage to allow you to do some other fun shenanigans with your leader flip. I think if you're going to be playing any type of cunning or yellow deck that is using ships, you're going to want to throw Boba Fett in there because it's a 2-cost +2/+3. That's actually pretty good overall. Next, a card I did not expect to see. We have Boshek, Charismatic Smuggler, 3-cost cunning ground unit, 3 power, 4 health. That's all he does as a ground unit. As a pilot for 2 cunning, when played as an upgrade, discard 2 cards from your deck, return each of those cards with an odd cost to your hand. +1, +2, +1 power, +2 health. Fringe and Pilot, not Underworld, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. An uncommon, can't see the card number out of 262 in JTL. You're basically using him as a pilot in the Han deck to be able to get those odd cost cards back to your hand, because you're going to try to build Han with as many odd costs in there as possible. Being able to return each of those cards to your hand when you play him, he's basically a 2-cost draw 2 on a ship with +1/+2 to that ship. That's pretty darn good. Pretty common or uncommon, just generic thing. Because even if your opponent deletes this, you drew 2 cards for 2 as long as you have a vehicle on the board. That's really good. Next up, we have Commandeer, a 5-cost cunning trick event. Take control of a non-leader vehicle unit that costs 6 or less without a pilot on it. If you do, ready it at the start of the next regroup phase, return that unit to its owner's hand. This is rare, I think number 235 out of 262 in JTL. There are going to be some vehicles that you're going to throw out there that aren't going to have pilots attached to them, whether that's because your opponent, whether you destroyed your opponent's pilot for that upgrade, or it's just not something that they wanted on the vehicle to begin with. You can utilize this to take control of it, ready it, attack with it, and then send it back to your opponent's hand. So make sure it's not something that they want to be able to continue playing over and over when you do use this, and make sure it's something that you get benefit out of for the 5 costs to be able to do this. You're probably only going to want to be using this on 5 or 6 costs, but because this does send it back to your opponent's hand, it's far better than Change of Heart, because it does mean that you can at least try to do something, either sacrificing it off the board with something that you have, or if you don't do any of that and all you do is get a free attack out of it, you just throw it back to your opponent's hand and they have to pay resources to get it back. It is vehicle only, non-leader vehicle only, but the only way you get a leader vehicle is if you put a pilot on it. So it's just a bunch of extra text, future-proofing, so on and so forth. Decent card, should see some play, especially if vehicles become a very popular strategy in competitive for Jump to Lightspeed. Next up, easy Han deck inclusion, Dagger Squadron Pilot. 1-cost, cunning heroism ground unit, 2 power, 1 health, easy unit to drop on the board. But for that same cost, you can pilot a vehicle to give it +2 power, +1 health. It is a rebel and a pilot. A common, I want to say 186 out of 262, can't guarantee that, in JTL. Dagger Squadron is a flight of B-Wings that were there towards the end of the Galactic Civil War. Fun stuff here. It is a rebel, does have rebel synergies, but it is basically a 1-cost +2, +1 on any vehicle you want. If you're playing Wedge Yellow, this is free. Pretty good. It's super simple. It's common. You're going to see a lot of this in Limited. It's actually a pretty decent card. Next up, we have Dengar, Crude and Slovenly. 4-cost villainy, aggression ground unit, did that in the reverse order. 5 power, 4 health, that's all he does as a unit. But for 2 cost in aggression and villainy, you get +1/+2 onto your vehicle. Attached unit gains on attack, deal 2 indirect damage to a player. If this unit is an underworld unit, deal 3 indirect damage instead. The upgrade itself is Underworld, Bounty Hunter, and Pilot. It's an uncommon number 139 out of 262 in JTL. This continues to feed into the indirect damage. It's looking like indirect damage is a lot of Bounty Hunter archer strategy and a lot of first order strategy, which is pretty interesting. I like that a lot. For 2, you are getting +1/+2, but as long as you're sticking this onto an underworld unit, you're dealing 3 indirect damage each time you attack. So that's a lot more benefit that you would have seen otherwise. But even just on something that's non-underworld, +1/+2 and on attack deal 2 indirect damage, that's pretty good. Next up, we have Electromagnetic Pulse. This is a 1-cost cunning tactic event. Deal 2 damage to a droid or a vehicle unit and exhaust it. It's a common, 230 out of 262 in JTL. Super easy thing. It's anti-separatist when you're going up against droids, or it's anti-vehicle, where you're basically able to deal 2 damage to it. If that doesn't kill it, you exhaust it. That's what an EMP does. Deals damage to electronics, and it turns them off. Super easy. This, one of the things that I've been looking forward to for a little while, we have a First Order Stormtrooper. 1-cost aggression villainy ground unit, 2 power, 1 health, First Order and Trooper. On attack and when defeated, deal 1 indirect damage to a player. This is a common, number 132 out of 262 in JTL. You attack, deal 2 damage to whatever you're attacking, and an indirect damage to a player. You get defeated, deal an indirect damage to a player. Use your other indirect damage strategy shenanigans that you have to add more damage to declare where that goes yourself, or whatever the case may be. This guy's just blasting, and if he dies, he blasts 1 more time. Super easy, super simple, great card. I want to build a First Order deck. This is going to be one of the first inclusions into the First Order deck, along with Legion General Pride. Next up, we finally have Bosk's ship, the Houndstooth, reliable and deadly, 3-cost cunning villainy space unit, 4 power, 3 health, underworld, vehicle, and transport. While attacking an exhausted unit that didn't enter play this phase, this unit deals combat damage before the defender. This is a special rarity card, so you're going to get 3 of these in the Boba Fett deck. Number 165/85 out of 262 in JTL. Very happy to see the Houndstooth in here after we got just the Slaver's Freighter in the last set. I always would love to see the named ships first and then maybe generic versions of them later, but we got the Houndstooth. It's here. It does fit with a Bosk. We'll see. We've already seen, which is pretty interesting. And it has that similar Boba Fett effect where if it's attacking something that's exhausted and didn't come into play that round, you do something extra. This is basically the shoot first effect, which I really wish they would have just called it shoot first, given it like an easy way of eliminating the text. Hopefully that's something that the devs work into and figure out later. Shoot first should just be shoots before, deals damage before the defender. That's it. That's all it should be. But Houndstooth, 3-cost, 4/3 in space. It's an underworld, fits with those underworld pilots. It's a transport, fits with those transport pilots. It's a vehicle, fits with pilots. Next up, we have IG-88, Murderous something droid. Not even going to bother trying to pronounce that since it's not clear. 5-cost aggression villainy ground unit, 4 power, 5 health. While an enemy unit is damaged, this unit gets +3/+0. That's pretty good. However, piloting for 2 aggression and villainy, attached unit gains while an enemy unit is damaged. This unit gains +3/+0. No power, but 3 extra health. It is Underworld Droid Bounty Hunter M pilot. This is rare, I believe number 141 out of 262 in JTL. This is one of those cards that I think, like Chewie, is very good on both sides, because your opponent is going to have damaged units while you're playing at least the Boba Fett leader, but there's easy ways for red to be able to damage units without doing too much. And then while you have that damaged unit, if he's a regular unit, he is a 7/5. If he's a pilot, he's a 3/3 plus the vehicle stats. That's pretty good regardless of what you're paying for it. 2 costs for the pilot, 5 costs for the unit. Sets up some shenanigans, different things that you can end up doing. If you are playing ECL, you can, and your opponent has a damaged unit, you can throw 7 damage onto a single unit that's on your opponent's side of the board in the ground arena, so long as they have something that you can attack. And with 5 health, he has a good chance of surviving. This is a great card. It is a rare. But I think this is going to see a lot of play, especially in decks that want to have a lot of bounty hunters, and also decks that want to have those pilots that do good things for the vehicles that they are running. Speaking of IGs, we have the IG-2000 Assassin's Aggressor. This is a 4-cost aggression villainy space unit, 3 power, 4 health, underworld vehicle transport, Overwhelm. When played, deal 1 damage to each of up to 3 units. This is a rare, number 140 out of 262 in JTL. Super easy combo. On 4 resources, you play your IG-2000, you deal 1 damage to 3 different units. On the next round, or if you have the extra resources, you're able to play the IG-88 onto this unit, and then on your next attack, you're dealing a ton of damage because you see damage units on the board. This thing ends up becoming a 6/7 with Overwhelm, and you've already dealt 1 damage to a unit, so that potentially can deal an extra damage to your opponent's base because of the damage differential. or you can attack into something that your opponent has that isn't damaged at all. So long as your opponent still has something that is damaged, you are set and ready to go. 2-card combo, super easy to use, super effective. As long as your opponent doesn't interrupt you in a meaningful way, this is going to deal a lot of damage to what your opponent is expecting. And while it stands right now, from what we've seen so far, it's not super easy to deal with space units. I imagine they're going to have some space neutering stuff, just like they had upgrade neutering stuff in set 2, just like they had token neutering stuff in set 3. We're going to have some space neutering stuff in set 4 because limited is a thing. And sometimes I feel like people hate the things they design. Who knows? But this is a great card, especially with the pilot in the last section. Super good combo here. I like it a lot. It's also very good in this deck in combos with Boba Fett's leader flip ability. We've had first Fleet Lieutenant, but what about second Fleet Lieutenant? Leia Organa, pilots to your station. 3 cost, command heroism ground unit, 3 power, 4 health, rebel official, restore 1. When played, you may attack with a pilot unit or a unit with a pilot on it. It gets +1/+0 and gains restore 1 for this attack. I believe this is number 97 out of 262 and uncommon in JTL. There are a lot of 3 cost good rebel units, so much so that I think players are actually gonna have to figure out what they're gonna do with their 3 cost slot. Because we've already got the Fleet Lieutenant, we've already got the X-Wing leader. And then there's things like Red 3. We're gonna have Chewie, which is a 3 cost upgrade. We have this Leia Organa. We have the new Millennium Falcon. There's so many 3 cost cards that can go into these decks that run with heroism that you might actually consider just running 1s, 2s, and 3s, maybe a 4 or a 5, but your primary goal is to get to 6 so you can play 2 3s a turn and do some interesting stuff with them. But Leia Organa, like I said, is basically a second Fleet Lieutenant for pilots or vehicles that have a pilot on it. It only gives you +1 instead of +2, but you get the restore, which means that you can restore some of the damage off of your base. She's also a 3/4, so she sticks around a little bit longer than the Fleet Lieutenant does. Overall, incredible card. Another Leia for Hunter decks. We might be getting a very interesting batch of cards here to be able to play with Hunter's ability of just trying to play things that have the same name. But beyond that, I think this is a staple in any vehicle-based Rebel deck, specifically Wedge, that wants to run a lot of pilots and a lot of vehicles, and Wedge wants to run a lot of pilots and a lot of vehicles. And the most absolutely busted card that comes in the Han deck. This is R2-D2. R2! 1 cost heroism ground unit, 1 power, 4 health. So R2-D2 stats, right? But for piloting and zero cost, you can give a vehicle that doesn't have a pilot on it +1/+1, or does have a pilot because its text says this vehicle can be played on a friendly vehicle unit with a pilot on it. Attached unit also gains what you may play or deploy 1 additional pilot on this unit. He's a rebel, he's a droid, he's a pilot, he's number 245 out of 262 and uncommon in JTL. And holy crap, this guy is insane. A 0 cost +1/+1 that allows you to put another pilot on any ship or put him on any ship that already has a pilot. You can run 3 total pilots on a Millennium Falcon. You can run 2 total pilots on anything else because this doesn't give you the ability to play a pilot, then play him, and then play an additional pilot according to the devs. Although I think the wording does kind of dictate that you could do that. But basically, as it stands, R2 basically is your second pilot in any ship that gets a pilot or needs a pilot, and adds +1/+1 4/0. It's a card from hand, but 4/0. It's a 0 cost pilot +1/+1. Just think of it as experience token, but it's also a pilot and triggers off of things like Leia or other things that want pilot stuff. I know I'm losing my mind, but this card is really good. Next up, we have Shuttle Tidarium, fly casual, 3 cost, cunning, heroism space unit, 2 power, 4 health, rebel vehicle transport. On attack, discard a dark card from your deck. If it has an odd cost, which it will in the Han deck, you may give an experience token to another unit. This is another Spotlight special rarity card. You'll get 3 of these in the Spotlight deck. Number 200, I believe, out of 262 in JTL. It's an easy 3 cost, basically 3/5 total, because if you're playing this in a deck that cares about the odd cost, like Han does, you're going to have all odd costs. You're not going to have any even costs because you want to make sure it hits. Just like most players that play for a cause I believe in, you want all heroism cards in your deck so you never whiff with that, right? Shuttle Tidarium wants all odd costs in the deck so you never whiff with that. There's a deck that's at least built around never tell me the odds, and you can do cool stuff with it. Interesting card. Next up, we have the Mandalorian Weathered Pilot, a very interesting inclusion in the Han deck. This is a 5 cost double cunning ground unit, 5 power, 6 health. When played as a ground unit, you could exhaust up to 2 ground units. but for 2 cost and a single cunning, when played as an upgrade, you exhaust an enemy unit in this arena. +3 power, +1 health, Mandalorian Bounty Hunter Pilot. This is an uncommon number 210 out of 262 in JTL. Even in the deck this comes with, this is a 7 cost ground unit, but only a 2 cost pilot. So there's some interesting stuff you can do with this if you are running double cunning. Because it is a pilot and because it does say exhaust an enemy unit in this arena on the upgrade portion. If you attach it to a ground vehicle, you're exhausting a ground unit. If you attach it to a space vehicle, you're exhausting the space unit, right? Interesting stuff. 2 power or 2 cost, giving 3 power and 1 health is pretty interesting. If you can get an immediate attack or a very quick attack thereof afterwards, it might be worth the 2 power, but I think this is one of the more funky pilots that exists in the game, especially considering the fact you want to run double cunning with it. Also, it works well with single cunning, much like Hotshot Laser Blaster does. This is an interesting design space. Not sure it's great, but it's interesting. And our last spotlight card deck is the TIE Bomber, a 2 cost villainy space unit, 0 power, 4 health, Imperial Vehicle Fighter. On attack, deal 3 indirect damage to the defending player. This is a common number 237 out of 262 in JTL. It actually might not be 37. Again, the numbers are small and busted up. TIE Bomber, 0-4. It's going to stick around for a tiny bit, but every time it attacks, you're dealing 3 indirect damage, which is what the Boba Fett deck wants to do, which I'm sure there's going to be Imperial decks that want indirect damage. But it's a TIE Bomber. It's going to bomb. That's what TIE Bombers do. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Next up, we have a character we have seen before, but a different incarnation. Much like Yularen got his younger version, we're looking at the younger version of Captain Tarkin. Full forward assault. This is a 3 cost aggression ground unit, 2 power, 5 health, Republic official. Each friendly vehicle unit gets +1/+0 and gains overwhelm. This is an uncommon number 161 out of 262 in JTL. Your average stats for a 3 cost unit is pretty decent. He is Republic tied, but not specifically to what he does. Basically, you throw him in an aggression deck that runs vehicles. Your vehicles get +1 power and overwhelm. That's really good, especially for what vehicles want to be doing sometimes, which is smashing into other vehicles, as that's how you get a big space battle or a big ground battle, depending on where your vehicles are. Pretty good card. It's an uncommon. Gonna be an average card used, like I said, in every aggression-based vehicle deck that wants to use this type of thing. Captain Tarkin. Next up, we have 2 previews courtesy of the Jodo cast over on YouTube. Link in the description below to their video. Go check it out. We've got an event that has a darn cool spaceship on it, and then we have a space unit that has 2 spaceships on it. First up, Direct Hit. This is a 4 cost Vigilance tactic event. Defeat a non-leader vehicle unit. This is a common number 78 out of 262 in JTL. Right off the bat, limited banger. Basically, anytime you're going to jump into JTL, if you're playing Vigilance or Blue, you want to be running this card because there's going to be a ton of vehicles. Now, you cannot defeat a vehicle that's being piloted by a leader because that makes it a leader unit, but any other vehicle out there, even if it's got a pilot on it, boom, 4 costs, just defeat it. It's a better Rivals Fall because it does clear out any of a specific type, but it's more restrictive because it is the specific type. Cheaper, but more specific. We also have the Onager class Star Destroyer here from Star Wars Squadrons, which is really cool. I like how we've got a lot of these really neat pictures of big capital ships. We know there's one coming for the Chimera. We've already seen the Fulminatrix. We have the Onager class Star Destroyer here. Lots of really cool stuff is associated with this, and if you've played Armada, you're familiar with this this ship. This is a great card. Our space unit gives us our first taste of space first order vehicles. We have Kijimi Patrollers, a 2 cost command villainy space unit, 1 power, 1 health, first order vehicle fighter. When played, create a TIE Fighter token. This is a common number 82 out of 262 in JTL. The first order hopefully is going to be spamming out a bunch of units to be able to get some cool stuff onto the board so they can stall long enough to get their bigger and badder and better ships onto the board. Kijimi Patrollers does that really well, giving you 2 units for the cost of 1, 2 1/1s. We've seen this a little bit before with things like droid deployments. There's a couple of other cards that will deploy a low cost token for a low cost unit, and obviously they're going to get blown up if anything even remotely looks in their direction. But 2 1/1s, 1 first order flavored, 1 just token flavored, is not a terrible thing. I do wish there was some sort of mechanic that allowed the tokens themselves, the X-Wings and the TIE Fighters, to have the traits or just put the traits on them. I don't really think there's going to be any issue if there was an X-Wing that was both both Rebel and Resistance, or TIE Fighter that was Imperial and First Order in terms of what the token was, but they designed it the way they did. I like this card a lot. If First Order ends up becoming a cool thing to be able to run, this is a 3 of in every First Order deck. This is also a limited banger because, again, space units, not necessarily for this set, but for other sets, is very difficult to come by. We could actually see a situation in this set where ground is much harder to come by, so you have to pay attention to that. But even if not, 2 units in space for cheap, A+. Our final leader for the week is a character that we've seen art for, but I'm sure nobody expected this as a leader himself. So without any further ado, we have Rio Durant, wisecracking wheelman, a cunning villainy underworld pilot. Action, 1 resource and exhaust this leader. Attack with a space unit. It gets +1/+0 and Saboteur for this attack. As an epic action on 5, you can flip into a 3/5 leader or a +3/+5 pilot upgrade on a friendly vehicle without a pilot on it. This is a common, number 15 out of 262 in JTL. On the unit side, 3/5 with Saboteur. On the upgrade side, +3/+5. An attached unit is a leader unit, and it also gains Saboteur, and if it's a transport, it also gains +1/+0. So Rio's whole goal is to bypass Sentinels, snake through the front lines, and get in there and blast that base, or at least delete shields off of a defender that you do want to attack. The front side being able to give any of your units Saboteur, any of your space units Saboteur for 1 resource. That's expensive, but if you think of it as a +1/+0 Saboteur event, paying 1 cost for that isn't terrible, and because it is not a card from your hand, that's also quite good. Common leader, which means this is going to be very accessible in draft and sealed. Flipping over to a 3/5 with Saboteur as a ground unit for 5 isn't terrible. We've seen other units, other 5-cost leaders with 4/6. I, again, don't really see why we wouldn't have been able to do that with Rio himself, but whatever, that's not the point. The point is, the real reason you use Rio is the upgrade here, that if you can throw him onto any of your transports that you have, which we've seen Houndstooth be one, I believe we're going to see another one here momentarily, getting that extra +1, making it a +4/+5, and then also Saboteur to that, and a leader unit means that it's tough. It takes very specific removal to be able to get rid of, but it also gives you a huge boom to whichever vehicle is ready to just decimate your opponent. Your opponent has to be prepared for 3 on the ground or potentially 4 plus the vehicle stats in space, and Rio gives you that ability to do interesting things. And because he's in yellow and because he's in villainy, he's access to some of the best events, the best vehicles, and the best units in the entire game. And, you know, this could be one of the premier yellow space decks that wants to use this leader, and I think he's quite good. It'll be very interesting to see what he does moving forward. Next up, our last set of previews this week come by way of DragonriderTCCG. I believe I said that name correctly. Their video is in the description below. Go check them out. Really cool preview video for this. We've got an event that deals with the space units. Not even a space unit, just an event that has a space unit on it. And then an actual space unit that nobody has any clue what it is. And it took me only 15 seconds to figure it out. Let's start with this event. We have, and I'm going to butcher this name and I apologize, Kyogre turn. Most people know this is a K turn. This is a 3-cost aggression tactical event. Ready a fighter or transport unit with 6 or less power. This is a common, number 179 out of 262 in JTL. This is keep fighting, but for fighters and transports. And with 6 power or less, which makes this actually much stronger than keep fighting, because it means you can do more with this than you would have otherwise. You can take a low power vehicle and throw a pilot on it, and then ready it with the K turn, or you can take a medium power ship that fighter or transport that does have that 6 or less power, and basically attack with it twice in a turn. The meme of this goes great in Grand Inquisitor isn't actually fairly accurate for this, but you never know, there might be some space shenanigans that Grand Inquisitor can get into that this would work very well, because it is 6 power or less. So very interesting ability here, very interesting event. It is common. You're going to see a lot of it with aggression decks. I would say if you see this in a draft and you are playing red, just rip that card out of the pack, place it face down, and pass all your stuff off to the right or left, depending on where you are. In sealed, again, if you have an aggression leader or an aggression base that works very well, and you have the critical mass of fighters and transports with 6 or less power, just slot this puppy right into your deck and you are good to go. And the second card of this preview is a ship not seen in Solo, but relevant to the plot of Solo. We have Rampart, Enjoy the Exit. 2 cost, cunning villainy space unit, 3 power, 3 health, underworld vehicle transport. This unit doesn't ready during the regroup phase unless it has 4 or more power. This is a rare number 182 out of 262 in JTL. This is Tobias Beckett's ship that was stolen shortly before Solo. They went to Vandor, did their thing, they all died. This is the reason why Rio is our leader, because you can pilot this thing and do some fun shenanigans with it. Unfortunately, even though it is 2 costs, it is not a round 1 play, because you have no realistic way right now of being able to generate that 4th power onto this ship to be able to get it to ready during your regroup phase at the end of round 1. You need to make sure you have a pilot ready to go on this, or be willing to cede basically all forward progress, because it's the only thing you can play. You can TDR this, being able to get that 3 power, shoot something, or shoot your opponent's base, get it back to hand, do whatever else you want with it later on. But ultimately, you want this to be your round 2 with a 1 cost pilot, say an independent smuggler. That gives you a 3 cost 4/4 for 2 cards, which is not amazing, but because it is underworld vehicle and transport, it has relevant traits which work on other cards that you want to use. You can K-turn this, you can throw Rio onto this and get all of his bonuses. Lots of interesting stuff that is associated with Rampart, but this clause here is going to baffle people on how good this card can be. I'm not saying this is as bad as Evazan is, because it's certainly not, but it does require you to play a little bit more forward thinking than you would with some other cards that can just be played as a 2 cost, easily accessible ship in space. It is a good card, it just takes some thought. Lastly, before we bail out of here, we do have the deck lists for the Spotlight decks. These are pretty cool. These will be on the back of the bases that are associated with each of these specific cards, specific decks. Some very interesting stuff. I think these are actually pretty decently built. You will want to upgrade some stuff, and I'm not specifically going to talk about what the upgrades are, because most of you know them, and if not, maybe we'll talk about it in future coverage of Spotlight decks. But right off the bat, we have our Boba Fett deck list here, which is red-yellow, aggression, cunning. We have 1 Boba Fett leader. We do have a reprint Jabba's Palace, and it is noted with an asterisk here. All of those are cards from a previous set, which means they're not part of JTL as a whole. They're just a reprint in this product, so that way you have access to them. We have 3 First Order Stormtroopers. We saw that. 1 General Pride. 3 First Legion Snowtroopers from set 1. 3 Zygerian Starhoppers. 3 TIE Bombers. 2 Fifth Brothers from set 1. 2 Elite P-38 Starfighters from set 3. 3 of the Hounds 2, 3 of the Bosk, starter specific, Spotlight specific, 2 of the new Dengar, 3 of the new Fett's Fire Spray, also starter specific, 1 IG-2000, 2 Hunting Aggressor, 2 Imperial Interceptors from set 1, 1 IG-88, 1 Boba Fett, 1 Fett's Fire Spray from set 1, so you have access to 4 Fett's Fire Sprays in this deck. 1 Electromagnetic Pulse, 3 copies of Daring Raid from set 2 or set 3, 1 Grenade Strike, 3 No Good to Be Dead from set 1, 3 Force Choke from set 1, and 3 No Disintegrations. Honestly, the combination of having Daring Raid, No Good to Be Dead, and Force Choke is a great removal package, or at least temporary stasis package with that No Good to Be Dead. That is a very interesting inclusion in this deck for a Spotlight deck. So they are pumping up the power of these compared to what the starter decks were originally. And while the starter decks were okay for the most part against each other, I think the set 1 starter decks are probably the most balanced. These set 4 Spotlight decks are designed to rip them open and just walk right into one of your constructed events, to premier events, to be able to play these decks and get some super interesting fun out of them. Next, we have the Han Solo deck, which is our yellow-green deck. Cunning Command. We have Han Solo, Echo Base reprint. We have 3 Clone Deserters from set 2, 2 Greedos from set 1, 1 Yen Nub, 2 R2D2s, 3 Dagger Squadron Pilots, 3 Cartel Turncoats from set 2, 3 Wolfpack Escorts from set 3, 1 Admiral Akbar from set 1, that's pretty cool, 1 Huyang from set 3, 2 of the new Leias, 2 old Ezras from set 1, 2 Boshek, 2 Blue Leaders, 3 of the Shuttle Tidariums, which are starter specific, Spotlight specific, 1 Death Space Skirmisher, 3 of the new Falcons, 3 of the new Chewies, specifically from this starter deck, Spotlight deck, 1 Commander Cody from set 3, 1 Mandalorian, 2 Tandem Assault, 1 Shoot First from set 1, 3 Waylays from set 1, 3 Never Tell Me the Odds, 1 It's a Trap, and 1 Commandeer. Not as many reprints in this set as it was the other one, and the removal package is a little lacking here, but Never Tell Me the Odds, Waylay, and Shoot First should help you some. You could potentially throw some extra stuff in here, change a couple of cards around to give yourself the better access to that. You'll probably want want surprise strikes, you'll probably want breaking ins, things like that. But this is also a fairly competent deck. I want to say at face value, without having played any of these decks, but knowing what each of them do, I think the Boba Fett deck is actually better than the Han Solo deck, but the Han Solo deck might come out on top with equal skill players because of how good this Han Solo deck can roll, especially with all of these odd cost cards that help you with your odd cost abilities. So fun stuff there. These Spotlight decks should be very interesting moving forward, and I hope we can all have some super fun with them in Star Wars Unlimited. There you have it. That is all the insane shenanigans. I was looking at something like 32 previews this week, which I don't think is the record, but let's not beat the record anytime soon here, FFG. There's only so much video I can put in a week. Last week's video was 1 hour and 3 minutes, so 63 minutes total. Absolutely insane. Hoping to cut this down to be less than that, but lots of cool things out there. Thrawn, absolutely incredible leader. I am very nervous that there's going to be a Hera that's very similar that negates the showcase that I have here. We'll have to see what ends up happening with that. Lots of other cool units out there. I think Thrawn is probably the most impactful leader that we've seen stuff with so far. I said 2 leaders would have a lot of cards associated with them, and that ended up not being true because I recorded that before Rio Durant was showcased. There's a lot of stuff in the Boba Fett starter that can help Spotlight whatever deck. That can help Rio if you switch things around, but I think ultimately they kind of picked some specific stuff, gave us a bunch of Thrawn stuff to front load the week, then the Spotlight decks in the middle of the week, and then trickle out some of the other leaders that people weren't expecting or maybe not necessarily don't want. I think Rose is cool. What can you do? But that's it. There's lots of cool stuff. I'm excited to check out those Spotlight decks whenever they come out. I'm excited to put the R2-D2 and the Millennium Falcon and the Chewie and the Leia into a wedge deck and just go ham and absolutely annihilate everybody in my path. Should be super fun to go off with, but that is all we have this week. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. Let me know what you think is the better of the 2 Spotlight decks, and let me know what your favorite preview of this week was. Like this video, comment on it. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for all of your Star Wars Unlimited needs. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you in the next one. Should be some interesting stuff moving forward, and I will see you in Lightspeed.